Hi everyone, welcome to the session of today. I just got told that I unfortunately cannot move because of my squeaking chair, so that's about all I can do. Anyhow, before we get into the show, I wanted to show something about our sponsor that is helping us to get the stream on the way. That's MSG, the company I work at, just to say that. And since last time I was giving a very bad introduction, I guess, to the company, I got a real marketing sentence or some sentences to say everything right. So MSG is an independent international group of companies with more than 8,500 employees worldwide. It is represented in 28 countries and supports its customers in their digital transformation. Founded in 1980, the consulting and IT company's range of services includes strategic business consulting and end-to-end solutions for the industries, automotive, banking, consumer products, food, healthcare, insurance, life science, and chemicals, manufacturing, public sector, telecommunications, travel and logistics, and utilities. Within the group, independent companies cover a wide variety of industry and topic-based competence. MSG Systems AG forms the core of the company group. Well, that's about it. So if you want to work at this great company that I'm working at, or if you need any service or software that we can help with, feel free to contact us. The URL is www.msg.group, and that's enough of the marketing. So recently I was working on porting an app from Xamarin.Forms 4 to 5, and all of a sudden my MediaElement went missing. So I thought I'd ask somebody who knows maybe one or two things more about the Xamarin than I do. So Gerald, where did my MediaElement go?
It's gone. It's gone. You can't use it anymore. We just threw it away.
Welcome to the show, and
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to work at MSG.
You want to work
amazing.
Here? Yeah, sure. Guess we'd be happy to have you, but I think Microsoft won't let you go.
All right. So you want me to tell you where your MediaElement went? Shall we just jump right in?
Yeah, I thought that's why you're here today.
Yeah. Well, I can talk about anything, so I don't care. All right. So I'll put up my slides. Then I cannot see what's going on in StreamYard anymore. So
they are on, and I'll just remove myself from the stream. The show is yours.
Well, you can stay. You can stay. Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Gerald, and as you already might have guessed, I work at Microsoft. I am there a senior software engineer, currently working on GitHub Codespaces, actually. But if you followed me for a little bit longer, then you know that my first and only love is Xamarin. So I still do a lot with Xamarin, and of course, .NET MAUI. That's going to be the next phase of this wonderful journey. And today I'm going to tell you about the Xamarin Community Toolkit mostly. But I'm going to take you through Xamarin.Forms 5. I'm going to take you to .NET MAUI. I'm going to take you through a very little bit of Xamarin.Essentials, and of course the Xamarin Community Toolkit. So let's just talk a little bit about what all this stuff is. I already mentioned all these packages. Xamarin.Forms 5 or Xamarin.Forms. Xamarin.Forms is now a thing since 6 or 7 years, I think. At some point, I got into it and I loved it. Well, let's be honest. There were some stability issues at some point at the beginning, but you can see it as a challenge, and that went much better. I think version 3.5 or something was kind of like the turning point where stuff got really more stable and really usable. So that was really awesome. I'll go into what Xamarin.Forms 5, Xamarin.Forms is in a little bit if you are not entirely up to date, or just as a refresher, maybe you keep forgetting what it is exactly because it's just so easy to use at that abstraction layer. Then we have a little bit down the road, you have Xamarin.Essentials. James Montemagno, you probably know him if you've been working with Xamarin. He's been putting out a ton of libraries for all kinds of sensors, GPS, saving preferences, doing the flashlight. I don't know, you could make this stuff up or James would have a package for it. But at some point, you had to install a gazillion NuGet packages on your project. And that is not something that a lot of people like to do. So what they did at some point is say, hey, we're going to start creating Xamarin.Essentials, which is basically one library that has all the other libraries in there, backed by Microsoft. And I think it's now even like the default package that is delivered whenever you start a file new Xamarin.Forms application. So that's really cool. And the best thing is you can use it with Forms, but you can also use it with Xamarin traditional Xamarin. So if you're not using Forms, if you just want to write your native UIs and that kind of stuff, you can still use Xamarin.Essentials. That's really cool. And all the way on the right, we now have the Xamarin Community Toolkit, which we founded, rebooted. I'll get into that a little bit later, last year. And that's where we're aiming to kind of add like the missing bits from Xamarin.Forms, especially now that Xamarin.Forms is going over into .NET MAUI. And with the Xamarin Community Toolkit, we're trying to provide you with new controls, all the converters that you might have been copying from one project to another. We want to have that in our package, so you have just these 3 packages to install, and it will get you there 90% of the way, basically. Okay, so a little step back for the people who might not be familiar with the whole Xamarin.Forms stuff. This is what it brings you: shared C# code base, 100% native API access, and high performance. So what Xamarin did very early on, Xamarin.Forms, 6-7 years, Xamarin, what is now called Xamarin Traditional, much longer than that. And what that basically is, they wrote like wrappers for all the platform APIs. So whenever you have an API in iOS, there will be a C# equivalent of that. And for Android, the same thing. And of course, .NET, that one was easy because that is all in C# and .NET already. So what this allows you to do is write all your C#, all your business logic in C# and leverage all the stuff that .NET has. So, if you want to create an iOS app or an Android app, you can totally do that, and you would never have to leave the comfort of .NET or C#, which is totally amazing. But we thought we could do better. And I say we, I wasn't at Microsoft back then, but I don't care. I just like to say we because I like to pretend that I've been part of this family forever. So then we came up with Xamarin.Forms, which is the abstraction for the UI, because the traditional Xamarin, you could share a whole lot of code with C# and .NET, but you still had to do that little bit of native UI in storyboards or zips, which you had back then, and AXML files, which is great, which will give you the pixel perfect control over native interfaces, which is, if that's what you want to do, you can still do that today. But Xamarin.Forms will give you an abstraction layer in either XAML or C#, where you can say, hey, I want to show a button on my screen, and it will automatically figure out for you with that button how that button should look like on Android and on iOS, so you don't need to bother with any of the platform-specific stuff if you don't want that. And then on top of that, Xamarin.Essentials for all the sensors that I already mentioned a little bit earlier. Now, last year in Xamarin.Forms, it's a little bit longer. These slides, I've created them a while ago, but so this happened over the last year, maybe almost 2 years in Xamarin.Forms, which is now Xamarin.Forms 5. So focus on accessibility, the C# UI extensions, also known as C# for markup, or it has a couple of these names, drag and drop, embedded fonts, which makes it easier to work with your fonts. What else do I see here? MediaElement, the one that Tobias just mentioned. I'll get into that. Source link, because I added the support for that. I mean, it was just one line of code, but I'll take whatever credits I can get. Shapes, paths, and clipping. I think a lot of people are happy with that as well. So a lot of stuff that is in here, much more, making Xamarin.Forms 5 the best, the most complete release ever, and also the last release of Xamarin.Forms as we know it. but more on that later. So just a couple of examples here. We have these brushes. So linear grid, and I think all this stuff follows like the brushes and the shapes and the paths. They all follow the syntax of WPF. So if you've been working with WPF, this should look pretty familiar, and you should be able to maybe even copy and paste it one-on-one, which I don't recommend. I never do that, but you might do that. So linear gradient brush, so you can just put these gradients in there. Before you might have used Pancake View by my good friend Steven, but you can throw it out now. You can just use this for the gradients, and that is great, right? There's much more stuff in the package right now that you can just use without depending on third-party libraries. The libraries that we love, but also kind of like the less we need them, the better. So you can create these great designs here with what is in the box. Also, carousel view is a big one. We all know the carousel view because basically the homepage of your smartphone is a big carousel view because you can swipe left, you can swipe right, and you will get these new pages. But you can also see them in your Netflix app or your Disney Plus app, which we probably all have during this pandemic. So you can swipe through all these lists and things, which is a carousel view. You can loop them. You can do all these things. So that is a control that is now inside of the Xamarin.Forms 5 box as well. Drag and drop, I already mentioned that. You can just drag and drop things from one place to the other, getting all kinds of information with drag over, drag leave, drop. So all the events are there that will allow you to use that. And it's just implemented on the same concept as the other gesture recognizer. So the tab gesture recognizer, you might know that one. We now also have a drag gesture recognizer and a drop gesture recognizer. So that is very easy to implement. RadioButton, and here this is kind of like odd if you've been following Xamarin.Forms, right? Because Xamarin.Forms, the original idea is that it will map an abstract button or label or whatever to a platform-specific implementation. Now, a radio button does not exist on iOS, which is for a long, long time. Same thing, by the way, for the checkbox, which was, I think, kind of like the first that James Montemagno pushed through. It doesn't exist on every platform. I think this radio button exists on Android, but it does not exist on iOS. Apple says, we don't do radio buttons. So, I say, okay, I don't do radio buttons. That's how I listen to Apple. But now there is. So this is kind of like the first step into creating own controls, drawing own controls, maybe in Xamarin.Forms, which is definitely something that can be done now with all the shapes and brushes and things and other stuff that's in there. And the performance of that is better. So it's easier to actually compose your own controls with all the things that is in Xamarin.Forms these days. So that's cool. Radio button is one of them. And what is really cool is that it has this template, this control template, where you can completely style your own radio button. So the top and the bottom radio button are the same thing. They just have a different template. So that is really cool, right? That gives you maximum flexibility to customize these controls. And I think we're going to see much more of that in .NET MAUI. Shapes and paths, again, I think this follows the same syntax as WPF. To be very honest, I'm not much of a designer, so I would not know what to do with all this stuff. But apparently, if you type in all the stuff on the left, you will get the stuff on the right. So that's pretty amazing, right? So you can make all these beautiful designs if you know what you're doing, which I clearly have not. So I know it's very powerful, very cool to have it in there, but I really need to get into how to use all that stuff. SwipeView is also a very cool thing, a very good example of how things are decoupled and evolved over time. Because if you've used a list view in Xamarin.Forms, that is basically the only place where you could use kind of like the swipe view, where you would have these contact actions. And also that only worked on iOS. So you can see it here in the image happening. You will swipe over one of the images and you will get these contact actions, right? But you would only have it in list view and only to have one or two of those options. No coloring, no styling options. So it was about time that we had the swipe view, and now you can swipe basically every visual element on screen. So you could wrap a whole page in this. Well, maybe not a whole page. I don't know. But big elements you can swipe that whole thing with all the events, all the commands. You can also say like, hey, do you want to actually need to tap on that command that's coming from behind there, or do you want to swipe it all the way through and invoke the action on that? So again, lots of customization is possible here. I'll have a little demo on a lot of this stuff. So let's talk a little bit about the release schedule. Xamarin.Forms 5 is out now, already back in November of last year, November-ish, around the new year, and it will get service releases through November 2022. So that's the interesting thing, right? I earlier said Xamarin.Forms 5 is the last version as we know it, because if you've been following this stuff, Xamarin.Forms is going to evolve into .NET MAUI, which is like basically Xamarin.Forms, but now as a first-class citizen in the .NET framework. I'm not allowed to say .NET Framework anymore, but I don't know how else to call it. So it's going to be a first-class citizen in .NET 6, right? So in .NET 6, you don't really care about building a Xamarin app anymore. You care about building an app, an application, to not get the confusion in terms here. An application. And whether that is an ASP.NET application or that is a mobile app, it doesn't matter anymore. You can just add those targets and start writing all the things, and that will be much easier instead of getting separate projects and installing Xamarin.Forms on there and treating it really like something separate. It will be a first-class citizen in .NET 6. But it will give you everything that that Xamarin.Forms 5 has today. So your XAML is in there, all the controls that are in there, they will all be in there. The transition will be very, very easy. It's basically in its easiest form, just changing namespaces. There probably will be some manual labor involved depending on how complex your app is, but that remains to be seen. But that is really exciting. So, but nothing is taken away from you. The one big thing that is happening under the hood is a big change in architecture, which will benefit the way we can extend it, the performance. The performance will be much better, and there will be, potential support for other backends, like maybe a Skia drawn backend or whatever, the MVU pattern, those kinds of exciting things. But that remains to be seen. But no worries, that comes out all in November of this year, November 2021. But Xamarin.Forms will get bug fixes through November 2022. So no new big things, but it will still get bug fixes and service releases. So let's quickly hop over to a demo on all this Xamarin.Forms 5 stuff. I'm sure you already know it, so I'm not going to make it very long. This is the Los Gatos app from David Ortnow. I have literally no channels open where this is streamed to, so I don't see any questions or anything. If you have them or if you see them, Tobias, feel free to shout out at any point. So here
people are still shy, so everything that's coming in is hello, hi. So you're good for now.
Okay, phew. No hard questions on Friday. That's one of my rules. So here we have the GitHub repository from David, which is, it also describes, the link is in the slides. Maybe we'll share them afterwards somewhere. But here is, so this was presented on .NET Conf 2020. And it describes a couple of the things: CarouselView, brushes, drag and drop, RadioButton. It has all these things. And also it includes the resize sharp NATO shadows, which is a really cool control as well. One of those controls that, I love it. Jean-Marie, I love you. He's the author of this package, but it would also be very cool to have all that functionality in .NET MAUI when we get that. So we don't need it anymore. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So go check that out for yourself. And then whenever we switch over to Visual Studio for Mac, I have it here running as well. So on the left, you can see like all the XAML that's involved here. This is the main page that we're looking at. So here we have first all the resources. So, all the templates, all the colors, all of that kind of stuff. We have a title view, a long forgotten, very good control in Xamarin.Forms as well. With a grid, what do we have here? Grid, favorites tab. Also, this is a cool one. This also has the Xamarin Community Toolkit in here. So we have this tab view, more on that later, which allows you to have a fully customizable tab view as well. You can already see that here. So let's just basically scroll through here, and that tab view, like all the way to the bottom here to the right, this is something that was very hard to do in Xamarin.Forms earlier, right? But now we have the tab view in the Xamarin Community Toolkit, and that allows you to do all this stuff. So here we have an example of that radio button that we have here. So this is just a radio button, but it has this control template, which is really nice. And here we have a couple of those carousel views, and I think these are draggable. So if I take this one, I should be able to drag it down here. Dragging, oh, there we go. So you can see that little plus comes up whenever I drag it over a area where I can actually drop it. So that's cool. And whenever I drop it, it shows up in my shopping basket here. And I think here we can have the swipe view in action. So I got it into a weird state already. That's great. So we could swipe this and we have that delete action. And if this was a real app, we might be able to actually delete this. So, this is kind of a funny app. Doesn't do anything really, but this could just as well be some kind of app from your favorite shop, and you could actually shop here for stuff. And, it actually looks pretty good, right? I mean, there's still some stuff to do. Here, boom, dark mode, poof, also cool. Not just saying that because I implemented it, but all stuff that you can do. So that's, in a nutshell, the very cool things that you can do now with Xamarin.Forms 5 out of the box. All right, next. What do we have next? So let's look at what is coming. I already mentioned this a little bit, but this is like Tobias already said, like also with MSG, this is kind of like the marketing thing. With Xamarin, you can build fast, beautiful native apps in less time with less code within a thriving ecosystem, and that is definitely true. And that's going to be more and more true while we go through this journey to 1.NET. I already jokingly said, like, hey, I cannot say .NET Framework anymore because we had .NET Framework, .NET Standard, .NET, I don't know, all the things, .NET Core, and it was really confusing for people, right? So we want to go back to just 1.NET, which is probably going to be referred to as the .NET Framework. And there we don't care anymore if we create apps for desktop, web, cloud, mobile, gaming, IoT, AI. We can all do it based on .NET, and you can just write your code. If you structure it the right way, if you have the right architecture, you can just hook up that new target, and you can hook up a new desktop front end or a new mobile front end, and that's how easy it should be to create cross-platform apps. So that's cool. Now, this is kind of what we had before. We had the .NET Standard. I'm not going to actually explain all the things here, but we have all these things that you can create apps for. We have the full-blown Visual Studio 2022 with 64 bits coming out, so that's really exciting. Visual Studio for Mac, you just saw that. Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio for Mac, by the way, is getting support for native macOS UI stuff, and I think also the M1 chip. So there's also very exciting times ahead. Visual Studio Code, a lot of people love that, and the CLI, of course, with the .NET New, .NET whatever, .NET Run. You could do all the stuff with this CLI because the CLI is back from the past and it's going nowhere. So what's going to happen is we're going to take that .NET Framework, .NET Core, and Mono and Xamarin. We're going to push that all into one, and we'll just have one .NET. We have one single SDK, one base class library, one unified toolchain, because under the covers, if you're running Xamarin, .NET MAUI, we will still use Mono, but you don't have to worry about that anymore. We will figure out that bit internally, and you just worry about writing code. And with that, we enable you to write cross-platform native UI, web UI. You can write, all cloud native stuff, which is cool, and continue improvements in speed, size diagnostics, and Azure services. Because if you have looked at like .NET 5, already gives you a big increase in performance and speed and whatnot. So just switching over to .NET 5 will give you a big performance boost, and that will be the same for .NET 6. So imagine if you go from Xamarin.Forms to .NET 6, .NET MAUI, that will give you a performance boost for free. So that's cool, right? And then I didn't even talk about all the new stuff, the new architecture that will make it even better. So introducing .NET MAUI. So it stands for Multi-Platform App UI, built on top of the .NET platform. No crazy stuff in between there. Single platform native UI, single project, single code base. So single project, you can just, right now we would have to have, like, maybe I can switch it over real quickly. Here we go. If you look at the solution here, we would have this shared project, and then we would have all the separate projects here for all the platforms, right? So Android, iOS, UWP. We're not going to do that anymore. We're just going to have this one project, which will, depending on the context, you can switch to iOS, Android, UWP, macOS. And that can all be held in one project, right? So no more confusion there as well. Deploy to multiple devices, mobile and desktop. So like I said, desktop, well, I didn't say that yet, but macOS, I mentioned that. Desktop is going to get a little bit more love in terms of feature parity. So UWP macOS is going to be loved a little bit more. The evolution of Xamarin.Forms, I already talked about that. Targeting .NET 6 previews end of year. Like I said, the slides might be a little bit old. There has been previews out. I think we're up to preview 5 right now. So it's coming up to the point where you might actually want to give it a first look. What does that look like? Also, again, these slides are a little bit old, so I think these were mock-ups. We can get actual screenshot of this right now because this stuff is in the first Visual Studio previews. So you will get this single project. And just by going through these target frameworks, you can add the different targets, right? So you can just say, hey, this is based on .NET 5. I see that now. .NET 5 iOS, .NET 5 Android, and that will add the iOS and Android targets. And then you just switch between like the different targets right here. You could say iPhone, Android, the Pixel, or Windows, and it will figure out all the bits it needs to compile for that target and go with that. But the really cool thing about this is that it will be much more easier to manage your fonts and your images. So you can just add that font once. Before, you would have to do that per platform. And especially for the images, right? You have to have a gazillion formats of images over all 3, 4, 5 platforms. And you need to have them in all kinds of formats and things. No more of that. You will just add that image one time, and it will all be figured out by this single project approach, and it will show up on every platform nicely. And here we have, I don't think this is in there in the tooling quite yet, but this is how it might look like if you still have platform-specific code. Of course, there's no way to get around that for some things. And here's how that could show up, and you can add it very easily through the tooling. .NET MAUI is showing up as Microsoft.MAUI in the Microsoft.MAUI namespace. Essentials is moving to, I think, I did this from the top of my head. I think I'm not mistaken here. Microsoft.MAUI.Essentials, I think it's moving into there. You will have the ability to create .NET MAUI applications by just going into Visual Studio, File New, Multi-Platform App UI, or from the CLI, which is really cool. We can just say .NET New MAUI, and I think there's also MAUI Blazor stuff in there. So if that is more what you like, then go check that out. We also have things with Blazor in store. For iOS and Android is, of course, not going anywhere. .NET MAUI cannot exist without, the Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android bits. So that's going to be renamed to .NET for iOS and .NET for Android. But internally, nothing changes because it was already using like the namespaces that match the iOS and the Android platform, right? So you don't have to change any code for that. Just target .NET 6, maybe change a little bit in your CS proj, and you will get a performance boost from the new .NET 6 bits automatically if you're writing Xamarin traditional apps. Also, file new from your Visual Studio or from the CLI .NET New iOS or Android. Here, if you're interested in like the more details on what is supported for .NET MAUI, go check out the comparison table, which is on github.com/.NET/MAUI. Basically, the interesting thing is there will be a little update on like the supported platforms for Android and iOS. macOS is now going to be supported by Microsoft directly. Linux is still community. Windows is going to be based off WinUI 3. And WPF is going to be supported by the community. And here the renderers, we don't have any renderers anymore. It's all going to be handlers. single project, multi-targeting, multi-window, all really cool stuff. Go check that out for yourself. So .NET 5 is out right now since November 2020. .NET 6 is going to come out, including .NET MAUI and the iOS and Android for .NET SDK support in November 2021. And .NET 6 will then also be the long-term support version. And from there, we're going to have new versions every November 22, 23. So, moving forward, the release schedule is very predictable, very easy. And yes, you should still create Xamarin apps, because that is a question that I got a lot. Like, should I wait for .NET MAUI? No. If you want to start creating apps, do it with Xamarin today. The transition should be very easy. If you have to start learning Xamarin, nothing what you learn will go to waste, because everything will be applicable to .NET MAUI as well. So I think you're going right now, yes, this is awesome. I want to punch a hole through my monitor. I can totally understand that. But wait. We didn't even get to the main event, because now I'm going to talk about the Xamarin Community Toolkit. Finally, an answer to Tobias's question. Now, we had experimentals in Xamarin.Forms 4, which were controls or things that we mostly wanted to give to the users early on, so that you could try it out, so that you could give us feedback, and so that we could shape it, like in stability, but also in the APIs, to make it something that you would actually enjoy using. So with those things, we slap the experimental thing on. You need to enable it, so you're really conscious about what you're doing. And with these experimentals, a couple of them, like the brushes, the CarouselView, drag and drop, indicator view, RadioButton shapes, and SwipeView, they were all at the time that Xamarin.Forms 5 came. We were like, okay, those are stable enough. We're going to ship them with Xamarin.Forms 5, but that still left us with the MediaElement, the C# for markup, expander, and I don't know, maybe that was all of them. I think, next slide. Yeah, that was all of them. They weren't really ready. Which presented us with a kind of weird situation, right? Because if we would leave them experimental in Xamarin.Forms 5, Xamarin.Forms 5 would see no big changes. They would be in experimental limbo there forever, which is not really great. So what we decided to do is say, like, hey, we're going to get those into the Xamarin Community Toolkit, which is a library separate from Xamarin.Forms. We can develop there further. We can add all the big features that we want. And we're going to take them out of Xamarin.Forms 5. So Xamarin.Forms 5 then, was kind of set in stone at that point. This is the APIs. We're going to have bug fixes for this. But in the Xamarin Community Toolkit, we have these awesome controls now, and we can add even more. Because at the time the Xamarin.Forms 5 was launched, again, I'll just say it was November 2020, around that time. And then November 2021, that's upcoming with .NET MAUI. There's a long time where Xamarin.Forms would have no real development, right? So we kind of jumped into that gap. With this, we added a lot of controls already, a lot of awesome controls that people have already started loving and start using extensively. So that's kind of like how we extended the lifespan of Xamarin.Forms by adding this stuff on top of all the other stuff that we are doing. So there's a little bit of history here. Originally, the Xamarin Community Toolkit, I think that was way back when James Montemagno, Jim Bennett, and maybe some other people were involved. They already tried it in 2016, really never took off. I think there was maybe a couple of NuGets on NuGet.org that we now took down because it was confusing to people which one they should use. It featured behaviors, controls, converters, kind of like the same thing that we were doing now. But now, we suddenly had a new reason to come up with this Xamarin Community Toolkit. So in 2020, we came back with this toolkit, basically threw out all the code that was there, started fresh to bridge the gap with the thing that I just mentioned. And not only the controls, because that is the thing that people, are usually most excited about, because that's the things you see, and that might be the things that you are missing from Xamarin.Forms. So you can see it here all the way down to the right. The camera views is a cool one. Expander, side menu view, avatar view, range slider. We'll see a couple of those in a little bit, but all the other stuff in here is just as important, and this is only a small portion. So the behaviors, I think maybe the converters is even mostly. So the converters are those pieces of code that you love using, okay, maybe that's overstating, but that you are using, that you need to be using, but they're too small to wrap into its own package, right? So what is going to happen is that you're going to copy that converter to the next project. Maybe you make a little change there, and suddenly you have to 2 versions, and then for the next project you think like, I still didn't wrap it in a package, so let's take it, let's put it in this new project, and suddenly you have 3 versions. So that's not great, and that is something that we're trying to unify with the Xamarin Community Toolkit. We're going to have all these behaviors, converters. I think we're adding animations in there so that you have more pre-built animations to use, extensions, helpers, all these kinds of things that are like the paper cuts with developing with Xamarin.Forms. We're putting that in the Xamarin Community Toolkit, so that will be your one-stop package for all these things. Now the camera view, well, you see here this test thing because we couldn't really show it in a live feed because that only works on a physical device. But you could just put that camera view in there. It has a couple of events, a whole bunch of properties that you can use to get a camera view up in your app just as a normal element. So you can place it anywhere in your layout, because you have these other solutions where you can have the full screen camera and just take a picture, but now you can have it somewhere in your layout. I'll be very honest here and say that the camera view still has some rough edges, but contributions are very welcome. So if you're an expert, and also like the platform native APIs are fighting us a bit here, so that's not great, especially on Android, but I think it should be usable for basic scenarios. But we'd love to hear what is not working or how we can improve. The expander, I think this is donated by Andrei Mishukovic. If you've been around in the community, you probably know that name. This was a separate package from him, and that's also something that we do because there is a ton of good stuff out there, a lot of libraries with a lot of awesome controls or other things. But having that burden of being a maintainer of such a library can be tough. If you are a single developer, there's a lot going on. Again, especially with pandemics and whatnot, there's a lot going on. So, to share that load a little bit, we are definitely open to talking about taking in that package, that control into the Xamarin Community Toolkit, so that it's backed by a little bit more audience, backed by Microsoft. A lot of more eyes on it, potentially more contributors. So that's really cool. The expander is actually, am I saying weird things now? Was this one of the experimentals in Xamarin.Forms? Maybe it was, but anyway, maybe we have those controls as well. But the expander might be one that was also in Xamarin.Forms. So here you can have kind of like that view where you can expand different headers. I think the design in this particular case could be worked on, but it's functionality that counts, right? StateLayout, well, this is definitely one of the packages that I was talking about earlier. This is one from Stephen, formerly known as State Squid, where you can have different states for different states. So you can have different views for different states. Maybe that's a better thing. So here you can see whenever you're maybe loading something, or maybe whenever something goes wrong, that you can have these different views and cycle through them whenever actually that state is coming up in your application. The tab view, so this is the one that I've been talking about earlier. The tab view is notoriously hard to style just because the native APIs make it very hard to style. So this is a tab view that is composed of pure Xamarin.Forms components. So that makes it very flexible in styling. You can place them top, you can place them bottom, you can swipe through them, you can have that little indicator you saw there. You can have the weird buttons, so they don't have to be like, only horizontal and only just have an icon. You can also have that big round button in the middle, which is very cool. You can have badges on it, so lots of flexibility and cool stuff. MediaElement, this is definitely one of the things that was experimental in Xamarin.Forms. Just slap that in here, play a video, play some audio with the MediaElement from a URL or whatnot. So this is a pretty cool thing to have in modern apps, I think, as well. Range slider, so you have the slider in Xamarin.Forms, but this allows you to set a range. So you will have 2 thumbs that you can move around, and you can specify a range with that. And also Popups, which is really cool. Andrew Hoofling made this, which was a multi-year endeavor because it started out as a PR for Xamarin.Forms. Then we moved it over to here, and Andrew has been doing great work for getting this in here, which is the native pop-ups. I think it works on Android, iOS, UWP, to get those pop-ups in there. And you can basically put any view in there and make it really fit in your application, which is really great. Various helpers, so async command to help you with your async scenarios. Weak event manager, I think that was taken out again. translate extension to help you with localization, image resources, have some helpers with that. I think we also have recently gained some helpers for your accessibility to make it easier for the accessibility stuff by Rachel Kang, who is now on the Xamarin.Forms team, is really doing a great job with that to make your app more accessible and do that in a very easy way. Oh, this animates too. I should have pressed the button, then it animates. Cool. Look, some animations, like I mentioned already. I think there's more animation coming by Sean, who's donating his animations from his wonderful super game word search game word. I don't know what the exact name is, but go check it out. It's a wonderful game built by Xamarin.Forms. So let's just have a quick demo, actually. I should have been more prepared, so forgive me while I pull this up. If there are any questions, Tobias, now is a good time to tell me.
Yeah, actually, there is one question that I think you didn't answer. And Sean Lawrence was asking, what's the plan for the toolkit in MAUI?
Good question, good question. I'll get to that in a little bit. And this is, I think, the Sean Lawrence that I was talking about, who has a very awesome app based on Xamarin.Forms. It's actually a game. I should see if I can pull it up. What is it? Super word search iOS. It's for iOS. It's coming for Android, I think. I shouldn't improvise here. This is not it because this looks horrible. Horrible.
I'm
okay,
pretty sure that Sean
it.
will post it in the comments for
us.
do
it. Okay. I'm not going to search any further. I was going to pull up the toolkit. Feel free. I started this, so feel free to self-advertise now. I totally put you up to this. Let's open this one. So, okay, maybe that's a good one. Let's go to the repository because, we love contributions. So go up to, we also created this kind of like, as well as like with the whole Xamarin 5 story, but also to make this because, I started contributing to Xamarin.Forms 5, to Xamarin.Forms when it was not 5. Which can be scary, right? Because it's a big project, lots of things going on. So the Xamarin Community Toolkit is also a much smaller and hopefully more compact project, which will make it easier to actually start your first contribution. So that is something that we kind of want to achieve as well. Maybe start with us and then maybe later move on to .NET MAUI. So there's lots of information here about how to install it, how to use it, how the project is structured. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in any way you can, and we will figure it out. So this is Xamarin Community Toolkit on GitHub. I think you can also go there by aka.ms/xct, which is a little bit easier. So you can just go there. It will bring you to the same place. And we also have the docs. I think I'm going to mention that later, but aka.ms/xct docs, which is really cool that we have actual docs on docs@microsoft.com. I'll be very honest again, it's not complete because we have a lot of stuff. Also, you can hear contribute if that's what you like more than contributing code, because contributing is much more than just code. But you can definitely do that as well. Now, if we pull up that same project, it's still loading. Why is it still loading? I can hear my fans blowing on my MacBook. I hope it doesn't come through too much on the microphone for you. I think I have it installed still on the simulator, so maybe I'll just show that. Where's the simulator? Where'd that go? Did I close it? Oh, man. I'm such a not professional. Oh, this is not going great.
Did you update your Visual Studio again, Gerald?
Yeah, of course. Oh, maybe actually. Ooh, you're saying. Oh no! I thought it was booting up some preview version that you weren't allowed to see yet, but I think we're all good.
That's what happened to me today earlier.
So, oh, really?
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's back up. Here we go. Sample. Let's go with the Android one because I have the bug that you probably see with Visual Studio on Mac as well, where the iOS simulator is giving you trouble. So let's just go with the Android one, and the Android one is not going to work with what I have on here as well. Oh my gosh, this is such a mess. I'm so sorry for this. This usually never happens. Oh my goodness. Okay, so maybe I'll go back to the slides for a bit and come back to this later. Sorry about that. I will do a little demo. Whoops, there it is. Put it here. I'll just let this load for a while I talk about this. All right, docs. So that's what I already mentioned. We have docs, which is really, really cool. Some docs are very extensive because, we could take them from the experimental features that were in Xamarin.Forms, and they were written by the actual docs team. So that was really cool. For the other stuff, there is the bare minimum there to get you started. But like I already mentioned, you can contribute there. You can contribute to the actual repository. And then let's talk a little bit about a future. So let's go there for first. So that's another question that I got a lot, which I didn't really realize when I started with this. Is that like, hey, what's going to be the future? And I've said for a long time, like, we'll see. This community toolkit has been invented specifically for Xamarin.Forms. It has this very specific use case. But what I didn't realize is that people were going to develop apps with this, and then whenever .NET MAUI would come, they could not upgrade from Xamarin.Forms to .NET MAUI if they were using controls in the Xamarin Community Toolkit. I know, I'm naive. I didn't realize that. So there is more. I'm not going to spoil everything here. There's more coming, hopefully in the next week, which is pretty exciting. But I can reassure you that we will have basically not one, but we will have 3 community toolkits. So one is going to be the one that we have now that you can use with Xamarin.Forms, just like you can use Xamarin.Forms until forever and ever. There will just, not be updates anymore at some point. But as long as iOS and Android do not introduce any breaking changes, you should be fine. You can use it forever and ever. So that's going to be there. Then we're going to have a Xamarin Community Toolkit MAUI compat package. So we're going to have a package that basically, because .NET MAUI is also going to have like a forms compat layer thing package. So that should make it really easy to transition from Xamarin.Forms to .NET MAUI. And it will still, use all the renderers and that kind of stuff. And it will actually, internally connect some stuff that you're doing some things. But you can still use all the things of .NET MAUI. And then you can also still use the Xamarin Community Toolkit. You'll just have to take out the old package, put in the MAUI compat package, update a couple of namespaces, but that should be it. And then you can still just use it. So that's cool. Now, the third package, that's going to be something very, very exciting. And I'm not going to spoil that right here. Like I said, I think we're planning to release news on that in the upcoming week. So stay tuned on that on devblogs.microsoft.com probably. But it'll be all over Twitter, my Twitter, everyone's Twitter, because everyone is going to love it. So let's see if this is already giving me a little bit more love here in Visual Studio for Mac. Not really. Not really. Come on. All right, cool. So with the time left, I think we are going to have to skip this one, which is not really great because this was the main event. So let me just basically go back a little to one of these, right? So if you go into like the repository, then I actually skipped over that too easily. So here's also on the right. If you go over to the repository, the project should build fairly easily if you already have everything set up to work with MAUI, Xamarin.Forms. And this is the sample app that you will also find it there. So there's a solution specifically for the sample app that you can use. And this will describe kind of all the behaviors, all the converters. We are trying to have a sample for each of the features that we have in the Xamarin Community Toolkit. So that will give you an idea of how to start using that. Actually, maybe I can just also show you in the repository. So if I go back here, so we have the samples. Here we have the sample app, and here we have the actual source of the Xamarin Community Toolkit. But here in the samples, you will see just a regular Xamarin.Forms app, just with a ton of targets. So we have the Android app, GTK, Tizen, UWP, WPF, iOS, and F#. We have F# support now since version 1.2, so that's really cool. But here in the shared is where the most things are happening. So if you go into the pages, you can see we have all these things. So all the behaviors, animation behavior, we have validations in here to make it really easy to do some validation on your entry fields and that kind of stuff. So we have all these kinds of things in here. And for all the views as well, so we have the pop-ups, we have the tab views, the avatar view, badge view, camera view. The drawing view is something that we gained recently, which is really cool, which allows you to have a little element on your screen that you can just draw on by tapping it. I actually I'm about to merge. I was about to merge it here, the drawing view multi-line. So here you can see that you can have this bar in here, and this is the way that you'd had to do it before, because whenever you would release the line and start pressing again, it would delete the other line. But then I said, hey, I want to have multi-line support, so now you can, and now you can draw this V and this L and this A and this D all separate from each other with separate touches. So that is really cool. You can easily export it to an image, as you can see right here. So you have all this stuff that you can do with this drawing view. The first scenario that comes to mind is maybe doing this for a signature pad. I've had to use that in the past. So you will have users sign their signature on there. So yeah, and there's still a lot of PRs that are up here. Now I do have to mention also, in light of like the future plans, that at some point we're going to have to make a cutoff date where we stop accepting like the big new things, because with like the legacy Xamarin Community Toolkit that's targeting Xamarin.Forms, we're going to follow the same pattern. So we're going to support it with services releases and bug fixes until November 2022. But I think somewhere later this year, again, this will all come hopefully next week. We will communicate a date where we are saying like, hey, this is it. This is the Xamarin Community Toolkit. It's not going to get any big new features anymore. It's going to have bug fixes. But for all the new shiny stuff, we're going to go to that new mystery package that I have not talked about yet. Spoilers. Cliffhangers is more of the thing that I wanted to say. All right. So what else? What else do I have? We have a little bit of Essentials left. So Essentials, I already talked about that. This is basically a lot of the APIs that are in here. So that really complements like the last piece of your app. Actually, I'm sorry that this ending is a little bit of a chaos right here. But let me try this Visual Studio one more time.
If not, we also
just
have
in the background.
To not make it that
okay, good. Okay, good. Then I'm not. Okay, so Xamarin Essentials has all this great stuff. You can do all these these cool things easily with cross-platform APIs in C# and .NET. And Xamarin Essentials, it's been a while, I think, already since 1.6 is released, but that also gained macOS support. It supports now app actions. You can do things with the context, so reading context from a user's phone. The haptic feedback, the file picker is really cool as well. I've hacked a file picker, actually, I think it's based on that code, a file picker library for a long time that would allow you to pick a file from your Xamarin application, and now that code is inside of Xamarin Essentials. So again, that's one less library to worry about. The media picker is there. I think that is a reincarnation of the plugin.media or something that James had. It's lacking some of the features, but the start is there, and you can make screenshots programmatically in Xamarin Essentials, so that's very cool. So with that, this is the end of my slides. Thank you so much. I'm Gerald. You already knew that. You can find my email address there, my handle that I'm using almost everywhere except for on my YouTube channel, which is on there as well. Where I post new videos weekly, at the time mostly Xamarin, Xamarin.Forms, .NET MAUI, but also some Blazor, some Azure stuff, .NET in general. So all kinds of stuff that we are all interested in, I think. So go check that out if you haven't done it already. And of course, subscribe if you haven't done it already. So let me give a last go at this Visual Studio. No, it's still loading. Okay, Tobias, hit me with the questions then.
So common friend Almir is here in the stream, and he asks, is there an ETA for VS for Mac, the new version, the one which
That's
will
a
be
good
built
question.
from the ground?
That's a good question. I never know anything about these dates and what I can or can't say, so I should probably not say anything about it at all. I don't know. I'll find out, and I know where to find Almir, so I'll be in touch. I'll find out if there's anything that we can publicly communicate about that, and I will let him know. I know it's coming. I've seen the first version, so that's good.
Yeah, that's cool. There's also a gentleman, I think, that I just saw on your PR view, Vladislav Antoniuk. I hope I didn't butcher the name. And he's asking about, what about markup for MAUI, the XCT markup extension package?
So maybe I didn't mention that very specifically, but I think, or maybe I'm confused with something else. That is definitely something that is going to stay in the Xamarin Community Toolkit for now. So you can still continue using that, at least with like the MAUI compat layer. So definitely there's that, and from the future there we'll have to see, but it's not just going away, don't worry. I mean, we're going to have a good path for you because we know there is a group of people that definitely like that, and one of them is Brandon Minnick, who is also very involved with the Xamarin Community Toolkit, so I think you don't have to worry about that going away anytime soon.
All right, there's another question. Will there be improvements for Visual Studio for Mac, or will you be also able to use Visual Studio Code? Are there plans for performance tools?
So that's an interesting question. There definitely will. So like we already mentioned in the last question, Visual Studio for Mac is going to, I don't know if how it's going to be technically, but I like to say it's it's going to be rebuilt from the ground up. I don't know if that's entirely the truth. But they're definitely, going to look into that's something that they did announce. Have native support for the Apple M1 chip, so it's going to be very, very fast. And they're going to incorporate more macOS native UI things, right? So this is all, if I'm not mistaken, GDK, or I don't know, it's some kind of component stuff that's not really native to macOS. So they're going to make this more actual macOS native, which should also benefit the performance and whatnot. So that should make it faster. Of course, all the stuff that you've just seen with the single platform, or the single project, and that kind of stuff for .NET MAUI, that's definitely also coming to VS for Mac. Now, the other interesting question is like VS Code, because we get like the CLI support for .NET MAUI. That also means automatically that you can use it in VS Code. But they already said that VS Code is not going to be a primary focus right now for like the tooling support. So you can use it. I think you actually can run the .NET MAUI bits from VS Code at this point. But it's not going to be the best experience. The best experience is still going to be VS for Mac or Visual Studio on Windows. So VS Code will work, but you will have to go without some of the toolings, or like select the emulator in a weird kind of way. So that's kind of the details that you have to think about in that area.
Anything on performance tools? That was also in the question.
I don't know about that, actually. I don't know.
Okay. Valid answer, I guess. One thing that I was wondering about, I don't know if you have any knowledge of that. We were playing around with app clips recently, and do you know if that is ever going to be supported with MAUI or Xamarin?
Also a good question. So I don't know how the technical implementation of app clips actually work, but it's one of those things together with like the Apple Watch and kind of like the things around the actual iOS. I think all the APIs are there, so basically you could write probably C# at least for it to make it work. But is that something that is primarily focused right now? No, I don't think so. I'm not sure if it's like actually not supported. I think it will be some kind of like extension, so you can definitely add the right bits maybe to your Xamarin application. But I don't think it's something that we officially support right now, at least.
Okay. I saw a workaround because for me the major problem is the size limit of 10 megabytes for the app clips, which should probably pose a problem for Xamarin. But the workaround is that you can put a native Swift app clip in part of your Xamarin app so that you have that. But yeah.
Okay.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, so for these things, like, if that's something that you want, open an issue or a discussion on the repository, and this is all, we're not just developing whatever we want, which would be nice, but we're developing what you want. So if that's something you want, open an issue, open a discussion, make sure that people know about it, and if it gets a lot of attention, then apparently that is something that we need to focus on, and then we'll get that prioritized the right way. So if you have things like that, then make sure that the team knows about it, and then we can prioritize it the right way.
Sure, thanks.
And exactly when the presentation is over, I finally have it running.
Yeah, I got also a nice segue from Vladi here. He said that it's time to switch to Rider for you. And as always, we're giving away a license of JetBrains Rider or any JetBrains IDE if you want to. So if you're interested, just shoot me an email at xamarin@outlook.com. The first one who will send me a email with I want that license or anything similar in the email, I'll send that license coupon out to.
Send me an email now. Email, please.
All right.
Send. I'm gonna do it.
I guess you already have one.
Ah.
Or maybe you're not even allowed to use it. No, just kidding. I know David uses Rider at sometimes when nobody's looking.
What?
All right. I think that's... no, I almost forgot. There's something we need to talk about, Gerald.
Oh, yes. The expert day for Xamarin. Yes, so absolutely. If you don't mind, Tobias, I'll just talk about it. So yes, go to xamexpertday.com, absolutely. Because we have been running, Tobias and I and a couple of other people as well. It started out as the expert day for Xamarin, where we would have deep dive expert content on Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms, and we've been running that for, this is going to be the 6th year, I think. So we also did it in person each time in Cologne, where Tobias lives and works, which is really great, at the Microsoft office there. But for last year, of course, we couldn't go anywhere, so we decided to do it online. And because things are still very uncertain, we are doing it online this year again, so that anyone can watch it. We can have these cool speakers. I mean, we had great speakers in the past, but now we already have MediaElement announced, who is going to transition us from Forms into from Xamarin into MAUI. But there's going to be much more speakers here. It's all going to be on YouTube. It's going to be streamed through my channel. It's going to be amazing. It's going to happen October 1st. So try to be there online and when it's happening, so we can meet up in the chat, or you can rewatch all the sessions. They're being recorded and on YouTube as well, so you can rewatch them at any time, as much and often as you want.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I think we're done. I'll just have a look at the questions. There's one more from Almir.
Oh no, not him again.
What will happen with the apps built with traditional Xamarin when MAUI is there? Do they need to update also, or yeah, I guess they will have to change a couple of things.
Yeah, so I don't know so that's what I mentioned earlier, right? Like Xamarin.iOS, Xamarin.Android will be rebranded, which means they only get a new name, kind of how we refer to it, with like .NET for iOS and .NET for Android, I think I just mentioned. But all the namespaces and all the stuff will still be the same because it was using the iOS and the Android native namespaces already. So the only thing you need to do is basically make sure that you're targeting .NET 6, and your project should mostly be good to go. Now, like I said, I don't know what exactly is involved in upgrading or transitioning your project from one to the other, but I expect it to be pretty easy. I know there is going to be a convert tool for the whole of .NET 6, which will also work for your Xamarin.Forms application, which will also, I think, work for your Xamarin traditional application and probably some other .NET 5 to .NET 6 scenarios as well. Now, this will be a try convert tool, so it will try to convert all the stuff for you, all the things that are needed. But there is so many scenarios possible. There is probably still some stuff that you might need to take care of yourself, but hopefully it's not going to be that much or complicated. But especially for the Xamarin traditional path, I foresee that the transition should be pretty easy.
Okay, I guess that's all questions answered. Thank you very much, Gerald, for
Thank you
being
for having
here.
me.
Now I know what to do with my MediaElement. And
Yes.
to everyone else and to you, Gerald, have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. See you next time.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.